Dun-dun-dun-dun. Yes, we're back again, everybody. In three, two, one, and go! We are back. And the question today, retired in Korea. Korea should just have the U.S. military leave, dude. That would just make everything so much simpler. Is it? That's the question we're going to talk about today. And there's some interesting insights about being retired here in Korea. And by the way, I'm Steve, the retired hobby tech guy. A little bit of background about us. Me and my wife, we sold everything that we owned in the United States: the house, the car, the truck, the guns, the ammo, the car, the guns, the ammo, the guns, everything in the kitchen junk drawer. And we ended up getting a couple of suitcases, and we ended up retiring here in South Korea. The cool thing was about retiring overseas, it allowed us to retire early. So that's a bonus. You can't beat that. Yeah, I lost some money as far as investments growing if I waited until I was like 67 or 70 years old. But then again, the life expectancy isn't, you'd have a handful of years and there's no guarantee. So it's either make some compromises early and maybe then, more time or more money later on. Of course, later on, you're not going to be as young and you might not be able to enjoy it as much. So, yeah, that's going to be some interesting little things that we got going on here. So, with that being said, welcome to the channel, The Varied Life. The first thing that you need to do is to like and subscribe to the channel. That would be so helpful. You wouldn't believe it. If you're already subscribed, 2 thumbs up to you all. I appreciate that. But if you're a returning member or subscriber, liking the video would help with the algorithms and everything. And I don't know, it's just something I do as an old retired guy. I get some kicks out of it. So with that, we're going to talk about this. Korea should just have the U.S. military leave. It's a sovereign country. Recently, I've encountered this online on Facebook groups and so on and so forth. To give you kind of some background, this is coming from people that are genuinely a lot younger than myself. I'm going to be 59 here pretty damn quick. And the people that are posting this are in their 20s. Yeah, and sometimes younger. We're talking about U.S. service members, their family members, and so on, contractors, people that are over here. And even some people that aren't, just foreigners thinking, well, Korea should just have the U.S. military just leave. They don't need them anymore. But is that really the case? Now, if memory serves me right, I know schools don't teach history like they used to a long time ago. I remember learning about history from Europe into the beginning of the United States, and then, all through there, all the wars, all the, the Roaring Twenties, the, Black Plague, every, world history, United States history, the whole 9 yards. And I remember there was a time, I think it was in the 50s, from like 50 to 53, there was a war that happened here in Korea. And up north, there was a communist leader dude who was like, hey, we're going to take over the peninsula of Korea. And the South Koreans were like, no, we're not really gelling with that vibe. We want to be, we want to have free market. We want to be our own country and blah, blah, blah. We don't want to fall under the guise of communism that was kind of spurred by China and went to North Korea. And so, yeah, it was just a big disagreement. It was like, yeah, no, yeah, I think you should. No, I don't really think so. Then hostilities broke out. North Korea came down with a vengeance. There was a lot of Chinese soldiers involved. They pushed South Korea down to the Pusan Peninsula. The little part of Pusan is where North Korea had come down in China, and then thankfully the United States got involved, and they pushed back the North Korean hordes all the way back up to the 38th parallel. MacArthur wanted to go and just get rid of China altogether, and they said no, and well, we're seeing the results of that. Maybe that would have been a good idea. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe he would be too far, it would be overreaching. We just don't know. But that did happen. And since then, there has been an armistice between North Korea and South Korea for quite some time. And while there's still some saber rattling going on with North Korea and South Korea, with the different administrations and the different people up north that were in charge up there, generally it's been pretty decent. There's always this rhetoric going on of how the North is claiming that the South is a puppet of the United States, and that they see it as an act of war, of doing these war exercises over here down south with the U.S. and the Korean military, heck, the United Nations, and all of that down here. They think that's bad, and vice versa. They think North Korean's bad, and so it kind of goes back and forth both ways. But it's interesting that these young people will just make a blanket statement. Oh, Korea just kick out the U.S. military. I mean, who wants foreign troops on their soil? That's the argument that we get. And that's kind of the sentiment. That's like having somebody in your house that you don't want in your house anymore. Sure, you invited them over and you had fun for a while. They helped you out with a project or whatever. In this case, it was getting the hordes of North Korea out of the Korean Peninsula, so that was kind of a good thing. And then there comes a time where it's like, yeah, you know what? It's time for you to leave. Okay. As if, people are saying that's kind of what it's like. And, we got a screen freeze. Oh no, are we back? Yes, we're back. Sorry about that. My computer system has been acting all wonky. I'm not sure why. But with that being said, a lot of people think that, just the U.S., should just leave Korea and everything will be good. North Korea's not going to do anything. South Korea's got more than enough people and equipment to defend themselves against North Korea because it's basically just saber rattling. They wouldn't do anything to reinstigate the war. Of course, then again, we didn't think that Russia would invade Ukraine or a number of other countries in recent history, and they have. And matter of fact, the Ukraine war is still going on today. So much for kind of saying, yeah, the North won't do anything crazy. Everything's all up in the air. They just might. Okay. But really, when you get down to the meat of the matter, it seems that these younger people don't know their history and they don't get into economics. They don't get into world trade or how countries and how they have this symbiotic relationship going on, especially after, Korea, Vietnam, World War II, all of those things. You see some interesting dynamics with countries and, of course, troops that are from other countries and other countries helping them out, even to this day. There's a number of incidents that come to mind that these young people seem to forget. They think, the United States should just pull out. That's no big deal. And it's like, well, maybe we're here because we're a deterrent to the 1.28 million man army that the people up north have. Yeah, and they also have a reserve of about 500 or 600,000. I can't remember the latest stats. But yeah, basically you're looking at a million-man army with about 500,000 in reserve. You're probably a little bit more if you count everybody. But about 1.5 million versus how many does South Korea have in their military? Last time I checked, which was just like 5 or 10 minutes ago, 300,000. And while South Korea does have a lot of technology that they have gotten from the United States, and of course their own technology when it comes to military and defense and intelligence and weapons and all of that stuff, they got some really cool military things on board. And they can do a lot with it. You're still talking about 1.5 million people. In a military that can come in droves in just waves like they did during the Korean War, where it's like minimal equipment, not a lot of technology, but they were able to get all the way down to the Pusan perimeter. They almost won. And if it wasn't for the United States, we might be speaking a different dialect here in South Korea. I probably wouldn't be retired here in South Korea if North Korea had their way back during the war. So anyway, with that being said, yeah, it's kind of interesting because what happens after that? Let's just say we wave a magic wand, it's just boom, and the United States leaves. What would be some of the effects? What would be some of the repercussions of the United States leaving Korea like that? Well, you have to look at what's going on right now. The Korean economy isn't doing that well. We have high housing, we have unemployment. The economy's not going well. The Korean government is giving out money to try to bolster the economy, which, in hindsight, seeing other countries that do that, it ends up like the United States. It ends up that's probably not a good thing to do. And we're still having problems. Good night. Let me try changing some stuff. Oh, I can't change stuff because I'm already streaming. Oh, no. Can I change that? No. Stream, it's already streaming. We might have to start this over. This is really... Or I could just talk and the audio and the video would be misaligned. Yeah, let's just do the misaligned thing. Anyway, it ends up if the United States left Korea and Korea kicked them out or whatever happens, the Korean economy is not that good as it is right now. And if you pull the U.S. military and the family members, the military members, their contractors, you would be pulling out because the United States brings into Korea about $3.5 billion per year. That would take a huge chunk. The Korean economy would take a huge hit if the United States removed all of that from Korea. Now, granted, it ends up that Korea does put in $1 billion a year, so that offsets it a little bit, but it's so that, they only bring in $2.5 billion. Only $2.5 billion. Still, that's a lot of money. And in a depressed economy that we're in now, that would depress the economy even worse. The other things that we need to consider is how many Koreans are employed on military bases here in Korea. Well, last time I looked, which was about a week ago, it's about 10,000 plus. So you're talking about 10,000 employees. 10,000 employees that are getting paid to work on U.S. military bases around Korea. If military leaves, they don't have a job anymore, okay? And they can't pay their mortgage, they can't pay their rent, they can't buy food, they have to find another job. Again, in a depressed economy, which we already have right now, that probably wouldn't help at all. Yeah, definitely not the people who would be basically fired because the United States military left. With that, we also have to look at other things. So if you look at, if you look at other sectors, the Korean government would have to pony up and replace the U.S. military and all of their equipment so that they could defend themselves against North Korea. So they could in turn be a deterrent against North Korea. So instead of having a 300,000 man army, you'd probably have to bump that up. So that would mean an increase in the number of people that have to do their mandatory service in the Korean Army, which you only have so many people, which would mean you probably have to do, instead of 18 to 27 months, they would probably have to do longer conscripted military service, maybe 4 years, 3 years, 4 years, something like that. Wow, that's rough. That's rough to handle right there. Having to leave civilian life and do the military thing for approximately, 3-4 years. And then there's the aspect of taxes. Taxes would have to go up to fund the additional manpower, to fund the additional equipment and logistics and intelligence. All of that stuff would have to come from taxes, things that the United States military, as they're here, they don't really have to pay for because it's already here. But if they pack up and leave, they take all that stuff with them. Korea's going to have to make up that void. And to do that, they're going to have to raise taxes. It's already bad here in Korea, so there's that. The other thing is that the market volatility here in Korea without the U.S. military, most experts, Korean and U.S., I've checked this out, is that the Korean economy would take a hit and that would go down as well. We're talking about international business, banking, could even mean a reduction in the I guess, the credit rating of Korea, if you will. You know, we all have our own credit score. Well, nations have their own credit score. That could be a very possible option, that they would have their credit rating reduced. So, again, to fund all of the things that they would need to make up if the U.S. military left, that would mean a higher interest rate, which would mean more taxes, and it would be more of a drain on the Korean civilians that are already here. So, yeah. And then on top of that, we're talking about regular business, we're talking about banking, finance, all of those things would take a hit. And then on top of that, we're talking about tourism. Tourism would take a hit. So, when the United States military leaves, boom, they're taking their family members, the people that come to Korea to see their family members and go on tours and trips and stuff like that, all of that is gone. So tourism dollars would be affected as well. And of course, if there's economic instability and political instability of what we see here today, that usually means a reduction in tourism as well. So again, in a depressed economy, that's probably not going to work out really well if we just packed up and left. So yeah, there's some very interesting things that could happen. You would have near-term repercussions, and then you'd also have long-term repercussions that would take a while to overcome. But then, can Korea stand on its own and defend against North Korea, considering that North Korea hasn't really upgraded their equipment in a long time? You'll get varying different types of answers. Some will say yes, they can. Others will say, if they threw the full onslaught of the North Korean army onto South Korea, it would be a bloody battle, and it probably, 1 million versus 300,000. Yeah, 1.5 million people against 300,000. It would probably be reminiscent of the waves of people. They just throw people into the meat grinder, and eventually you'll overtake and get Korea. Which they almost did if it wasn't for MacArthur and the Pusan perimeter and the U.S. coming in. And of course, they came around to Incheon and kind of did that sandwich maneuver to attack the behind the main front line to cut North Korea off. And yeah, it worked really well. So yeah, there's so many different variables. It's really hard to tell, but generally, if it was an all-out, we're going for broke, then yeah, it would probably be a little problematic for South Korea. Granted, South Korea has come a long way when it comes to military. Their military are awesome, great people, soldiers, Navy, Air Force, Marines, the whole 9 yards. They're spec ops, incredible soldiers. So my heart goes out to them because I was prior military and I worked with some of those groups. So yeah, it was really, really good. I have an affinity, and of course I'm retired here in Korea. So yeah, there's that. We got somebody that popped in here. Van Nomadic says, greetings everyone. Greetings. We're talking about should Korea have the U.S. military leave, and how people are, some of the youngsters are saying, yeah, they should just leave and all the problems would be solved. But as we're pointing out, there's a lot of things that could pop up, especially in a depressed economy, where there's probably some things that these young people haven't considered, and it's probably because they haven't had any good history classes. And if you don't know your history, then you're doomed to make stupid mistakes. And we don't like stupid mistakes. With that being said, how do I feel? Do I think the United States should stay in Korea forever? Absolutely not. I think Korea should stand on its own 2 feet. I think there should be a tiered removal, and eventually Korea can stand on its own. I'm all for sovereign countries having sovereign borders, protecting themselves. But in the light of all that's going on, sometimes you need help. And, nobody likes it, but they needed it. They needed the help. And Korea is also of strategic importance. And the Korean government, whether it's left or right, both types of administrations agree that the United States is good for South Korea in some way, shape, or form. So it's not like, we need to get rid of them. The majority of older Koreans understand this. And the younger people, it's a very minute segment of society that wants the United States to leave Korea. Personally, I think, eventually the United States should leave Korea. but it's going to take a while to get spun up with technology, equipment, manpower. Oh, and the other thing in Korea, it's a super age society, and they're not pumping out kids like they used to, kind of like Japan or the United States for that matter. We're kind of going in the other direction. So we're going to have more equipment. We're going to have rely on technology and things like that to be in the place of having boots on the ground, which every country in the world is pretty much doing with their military. They're trying to do more with less and try to do more with technology. So instead of having 10 people do a job, you're going to have 2 or 3, and then you're going to have technology and equipment that will do those jobs. So yeah, it's just, we have drones and all kinds of crazy stuff. So yeah, it's very interesting when I hear the young people, I'm still young in my head. My body says otherwise, but that Korea should just leave and everything would be fine. Well, we haven't even talked about some of the other things. Around military bases, you have landlords. You have Korean landlords, you have restaurants, you have businesses that are frequented by U.S. military, their families, and contractors. And that means that just besides the 10,000 Koreans that work for the U.S. military on the military bases themselves, you're talking about thousands and thousands of other jobs and other restaurants and businesses. You've got restaurants, fast food, you've got sushi places, you've got Filipino restaurants, you've got Brazilian, you have all these restaurants that are around these military bases that provide goods and services and a lot of good food to military service members and their families. If the military left, who are they going to serve? Yeah, normal Koreans don't usually frequent these places as much. And so in a depressed economy that we're in right now, some of these restaurants, there's a lot of businesses that are already closing. There's coffee shops, there's restaurants. I've seen one place has already had like 3 or 4 different restaurants in the same building. They tried it didn't work, it closed. Another restaurant came in and tried to close, it didn't. Other restaurants are hanging on, and prices are going up. So yeah, it's and with that, in the Korean economy, Koreans are trying to save money as well. So they're being hit by this economic downfall that they're currently in. So removing the U.S. military would not only affect that, but all the thousands and thousands of businesses. Just walking around Camp Humphreys, on the outside of Camp Humphreys, and if you just look at all the military businesses and restaurants that are focused on servicing the U.S. military and their families and contractors, if all those went away, wow, now you have people that can't make money, they can't feed their family, they can't pay their mortgage, and then, what about paying the rent on the facility that they're using for their store, business, or restaurant? So now you have landlords that own the building, that rent the building out to these businesses, and they shut down. The landlords are left holding the note on their mortgage, and they can't pay that. So what do you do with that? Unless the building's paid off, which some of them probably are, but Korea is known as being, property rich and cash poor. In other words, they have leveraged a lot of money through loans and debts and mortgages to become rich in those real estate assets, but they haven't paid them off. The majority of people haven't. And so, yeah, pulling out of Korea probably would be a little rough. Probably be a little rough. That's all I'm saying. So it's just not as simple as saying, Korea should just pull out of the United States. The United States should pull out of Korea, or Korea should kick the U.S. military out. They don't understand the repercussions that would come along with that and how devastating that could be. Now, again, I see both sides. I think that Korea, should be able to stand on its own, and that's what I really wanted to do. But then I've also been in the military. I served a career for over 20 years. I've been involved in security and so on and so forth. I took history classes in school back when I went in school. When you had books, libraries, and the Dewey Decimal System, you actually had to know the economics. You had to know the wars. You had to know this and that and business and politics and how all these things wove together and how they interacted with each other to really become an educated person. And now we don't do that. And so now we have young people that are just like, oh, just take the military out. Everything will be fine. And they have no regard for housing, retail, business, finance, the economy, and how the GDP, that would slow down, for Korea. In other words, the economy is going to slow down even more than what it is now, and which would result in a loss of the won, in the strength of the won, which would ripple out amongst the business sector of the world. It would be some problems. So, and then throw on a little bit of political instability and, some interest rate rises because, hey, the U.S. left. I mean, it is what it is, unfortunately, but that could not do well for Korea, especially not in the economy that we have right now. So I think that there needs to come a time where each country needs to be able to stand on its own, which I totally support. Countries should be sovereign. They should have their own borders. They should protect their people. They shouldn't have to rely on anybody else. But the fact of the matter is, reality shows that sometimes we need help, even if we don't really want that help sometimes. And it's like, eventually things will work out. But these young people don't seem to understand on all the things that can happen if you just pull the U.S. out of the peninsula of Korea. So, yeah, that's what going on. Anyway, that's just a little 2 cents, some stuff that got up my nose this morning because the young people were kind of arguing back and forth on Facebook groups and so on and so forth. And it's always the younger people that are like, oh, just leave. Just have the military leave. Everything will be fine. And it's like, what did you do in school? Do you not know how the world works? I mean, I wish it worked that way. I wish, let's just, leave and nothing would change. That would be absolutely good. Ferris pops up and says, hey, good morning. Good seeing you. You too, sir, as well. We're having some audio-video difficulties, so things aren't matching together. So we're just going to power through this, and I guess I got to restart my system and the whole 9 yards. But yeah, we're just talking about Korea and the young folks who want the U.S. military to leave. And again, it's a small minority of people here in Korea that want the U.S. military to leave. Now, I think eventually they should leave. That's just me. Again, I can see both sides of the coin, but I definitely see the side of the coin of where you can't just randomly pull out the U.S. military and expect everything to be hunky-dory. There will be some fallout from that. And so you kind of have this symbiotic relationship where, there's problems and stuff like that. But when you bring in $2.5 billion a year for housing, retail, business, so on and so forth, and also the stability that it brings in for business and finance and so on and so forth, it's a very complicated situation. Sultan Riemann. Hopefully I said that correctly. Good morning from Bundangu. All right, good morning. Glad to have you on the show. Kind of interesting. I'm up here close to Pyeongtaek. Actually, Painsongup is where we're located. And we're having audio-video problems. So if my voice doesn't match with the video, we're just going to power through and do that. Ferris says, I don't think the U.S. will leave. It's a very strategic position for the U.S. and it provides security for South Korea. That is true, and that was something that we brought up, is in North Korea they have like a 1.28 million man army with about 500,000 or 600,000 in reserve, and Korea has about 300,000 in their military. So Korea has some good technology, whereas North Korea doesn't, but as far as manpower, if North Korea was just hell-bent and said, we're just going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at taking over Korea, they would do the waves and the waves of their military until eventually they would get down and take Korea. And, what do you do when, they didn't think that would happen before? But the rhetoric and what they believe in North Korea is so hard and so ingrained, and they're so brainwashed that yeah, that's what they ended up doing. And so it's really hard to fight somebody who has really made up their mind to do something, and that's on both sides as well. So yeah, it ends up it's a very complicated situation. There is, in other words, there is no the United States should just leave Korea and boom, everything would be fixed. No, that would never, ever, ever happen in reality. That could never happen where there would be no fallout. Unfortunately, the world is a complicated place with tons of variables. And again, people will screw up everything. So, but with that being said, it's interesting because South Korea has taken down the propaganda loudspeakers up on the DMZ. And North Korea has reciprocated and they have taken down their loudspeakers. So we're getting kind of a lull in the storm, but then North Korea came back and they said, oh, the U.S. is bad, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, very, very. So, yeah, more saber rattling, but they just took down the loudspeakers. So I think that's a step in the right direction. Yeah, it is what it is. And by the way, some of the young people said, oh, there's going to be demonstrations, which there are for a couple of days around the military base here. And yeah, probably don't get involved in those. Some people were advocating, oh, you should go and protest with them to have the United States leave Korea. And it's like, no, don't do that. Please don't do that. It's very, very bad because South Korea has a law that forbids foreigners from protesting here in Korea. And it's a 500,000 won fine, and it could also include jail time. So, yeah, you probably don't want to do that. That could also mean probably immediate deportation after you did your fine and or prison sentence, jail time, and then they would deport you from the United States, and you'd probably be blacklisted or banned from Korea for a number of years. I'm not sure how many, but yeah, it probably wouldn't go well. So if you're a U.S. service member or a family member of a U.S. service member or contractor or whatever that is working on a military base in Korea, do not protest in Korean protests because it's illegal. You're not supposed to do that. And yeah, Koreans have freedom of speech. They can protest all they want, but they have a rule and a law. Foreigners, yeah, you got to do that on your own ground. So that's what we got going on. Yeah, a lot of other things we talked about. Ferrithus brings up the point about how the U.S. and it's very strategic to counter China and a number of other things in a way we talked about that already. So yeah, very interesting stuff that pops up of living in Korea and being retired here. We've been over here over 2.5 years now, and things have been interesting. There are some compromises that we had to make, but being able to retire early versus staying in the United States and working a blood-sucking job that taxed my soul to the nth degree, I'll take overseas and early retirement any day of the week. I'm really enjoying my retired life. So anyway, yeah, I just want to share some of that dynamic of the young people and what the young people think and how they think you can change things, at the drop of the hat, and it doesn't really work like that. Sometimes there's other things that pop up, and so I just want to kind of give a broader view. I can see both sides of the coin. Yes, I think Korea should be on its own. Can they do it if we just immediately pull out? I don't think so. I think there needs to be, like I said, there needs to be a movement towards Korea standing on its own. And I want the best for the Koreans, and their country, because I am a visa holder in their country, so I'm a guest, and so I want the best for Korea. But then I also want what's best for the United States, so I need to balance that out. But since I'm living in Korea, I'm a little bit biased. So with that being said, it's a great place. We really enjoy it, and it is what it is. So thank you, everybody, for putting up with the mismatched audio and video. I apologize for that. It probably looks like a bad dubbed movie. Yeah, it's just going to be interesting. But the early retirement is good. And some other people are looking forward to that as well. Matter of fact, therapist says, looking forward to my early retirement as well, especially when you have friends retiring around you. It's like a carrot on a stick. I know, right? You see all these people and it's like, hey, John's leaving, Fred's leaving, and he's retiring, and maybe you got somebody who dies while they're at work. That's kind of a little motivation as well. Oh man, maybe I should retire early. Yeah, it gets you excited. It definitely gets you excited. Sultan pops up and says, it's tricky, yeah, but then again, the U.S. isn't a reliable partner or ally anymore, and the U.S. itself is so cooked right now, the world too has changed, mostly in chaotic ways, unfortunately, so who knows? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world, and as far as, yeah, you're right, everything is way different than what it was, but then if we were talking about history, and taking tons of history classes when I grew up, it ends up, it's so many things change over time. And I don't think there was really a time where everything was static and calm and hunky-dory. There was always things popping up during history in the United States and other countries around the world. It just seems now we have social media, we're more interconnected, so we see more of these things. When before we had social media, things were still going on, but we just didn't know about them. And then we got TV, and then we got radio, and then we got, radio and then TV, and then we got, national broadcasts, and then we got international broadcasts, international news, and all of a sudden it's like, man, the world's gone crazy. Look at this guy on Instagram and TikTok and this and that and crazy. A lot of that stuff's been going on for a while. The thing was, a long time ago, it was even worse. If you talk about the revolution of Mao Zedong, if you look at not Putin, but Russia and Stalin and Pol Pot, and, they killed millions and millions of people. All these dictators have killed millions and millions of people. And then plagues and wars and this and that. It's just like, holy crow, there's always, and even if you go back into ancient history, this country was going against this country and killed these many people. I mean, there was always something going on. So the best thing that we can do is just try to make the best out of the decisions we make, excuse me, as individuals. And if as individuals we make the right decisions and we do what is right and good, then that is doing our small part for the whole. So, yeah, just be a good person. Don't steal, don't murder, don't kill, don't beat people up. It's kind of the golden rule thing, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, unless you're, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. The everyday people are good people. The problem is you usually have some fanatics everywhere. And those are the people that make the problems. So anyway, yeah, that's what we got going on. Ferrith says, 20 more years for me unless I win the lottery. Yeah, I don't know how many lottery tickets I bought. I think I won like $15 once. That was the extent of my lottery winnings. So that's what we got going on. Yeah, even Sultan says that I'm semi-retired myself, and it's great, right? Even semi-retired, which means you're semi-working and not working as much. And being overseas, usually, depending on the country that you're in, you have lower expenses than what you do in other places. So like our expenses are about half of what we're paying in the United States. And then you have other people that come from other countries that are even lower, and they come to Korea and they work and they're like making way better money than they ever would in their own home country. So yeah, it goes both ways on that. People can retire to overseas locations. People in overseas locations go to the United States or other countries to earn more, faster, quicker, and to provide for them and their families, which that money goes back to their countries, which helps their economy. So yeah, we're in this symbiotic relationship that we have, and so we should remember that, and we should treat people with kindness, with politeness. We should just be good to each other. We should be good human beings, is what it comes down to. So with that being said, it is getting time for lunch, and I'm starving. I am starving. I had my coffee, but I'm starving right now. So we're going to have to go out. Matter of fact, I think we're going to go get some Indian food. I was recommended a real good Indian restaurant that is close by. So we're going to go check that out. Maybe some chicken masala. I think we're going to some naan bread. Ooh, I think that's going to be good. I'm already hungry, so that makes it even worse. So we're going to go ahead and close this out. Again, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. That would be the best thing that you could do. If you want to contact me, there's the email address. If you want to buy me a coffee, people on the scrolling ticker have done that, so I have much respect for them. And yeah, we're going to close this out. And the last word is going to go from Sultan, who says, thank you very much for your videos. Enjoy your lunch. And you as well, sir. And everybody else that is in the United States, have a good evening, good dinner, good sleep, I think, or wherever you're watching from. I just hope there's good on you. So good for you and good everybody else. All right, with that being said, it is time to go, and we will see you all. Peace.